excited for this series of mini talks today, looking at all things VR, games, and creative tech. So that's going to be great. Really excited to welcome 5 incredible virtual reality artists from across the world to join us. And starting us off is Thomas Kildren of Fletcher Studios. Thomas is a creative powerhouse from NYC, now living in the gritty Rust Belt. He trained as an illustrator before making the jump to digital as a photo editor at the New York Post. He soon taught himself other disciplines like 3D, modeling and animation, and VR development has been his biggest achievement as it's the culmination of all his previous disciplines, and his fervent hope is that his game Booper Get Home will be the launch of his game dev career. He's currently juggling game dev while being a stay-at-home dad, tending to a wife, 2 boys and a neurotic house cat. So without further ado, we'll invite Thomas up.
Thank you, thank you. I'm doing quite well. Thank you so much for the lovely introduction. And
My pleasure.
So excited to be here.
We're excited to take it away.
So, as the introduction said, I'm Thomas. I'm a stay-at-home dad, and I'm making a VR game based on the drawings of my son. He's on the autism spectrum and doesn't talk a lot, but loves to express himself through his art. A great example of this was he goes to special education, and one year for Halloween, he was dressed up as Bob Ross, the Happy Trees painter. And in order to, get out of him what he was for Halloween, his teachers just couldn't understand him when he was trying to say Bob Ross. So they had him draw it, and they didn't understand what the drawings were. But when they showed the drawings to us, it was a picture of an easel. It was a picture of a paintbrush, the afro, the beard. And as soon as we saw it, we knew exactly what he was trying to express. And we were basically with the understanding that he may never ever have full speech capabilities. So I'm using this game as a way of trying to express or get the idea across that people on the spectrum have meaningful ways of being able to contribute to the world at large. And with that, I'd like to show you a gameplay trailer. Now, with that, I do have to give a shout out to the lovely Jack Barton, who made the audio. He happened to see a trailer on Twitter and said, I want to write you a song, and just go ahead and use it. So the game itself is obviously all about exploration, problem solving. There's no combat and very little in the way of violence. My initial marketing research shows that everything out there is pretty much zombie, Call of Dead, shoot 'em up things, and young kids see this new technology, they want to be a part of it, but there's such a small volume of what's available for them to play that parents can find acceptable. As the developer, if this game takes off in any appreciable way, I want part of the proceeds to go to autism awareness and acceptance. And if it really takes off, I have the idea of creating a side app that basically a parent could use a tablet or smartphone and take a picture of their kid's drawing, and the app will cut, rig, and animate it so a kid could play their own drawing in game. And obviously, hopefully DLC, t-shirts, the movie adaptation, and whatnot. I did want to touch a bit on, obviously, we're all doing this in the time of COVID. And normally I would have been showing this at Game Dev Expos. There's a couple of big ones here in the Midwest. And just as COVID hit this time last year, I was this close to being on a radio interview and showing my game at the Cleveland International Film Festival. And then COVID hit, we went into lockdown, and so many of the opportunities were just lost. But what's been incredible about having to go back to, well, basically waking up at 5:30 in the morning to work on my game, and then having to, get the family up, get everybody fed, get them with their school day, playing tech support, is the opportunities that have come up because of this. Certainly Tinderbox has been incredible. I've also had opportunities to join the Oculus Launchpad program, which has also proven to be amazing. And because I've been on Twitter so much, I've been expanding my social media outreach and have met so many incredible people. So even in the worst of times, there's a small blessing in it. And I just wanted to be thankful that I've been given these opportunities. I'm reaching an audience here in Scotland that I don't think I would have ever had the opportunity to do before. And I just want to thank you so much for giving my game a little notice.
Thank you so much, Thomas. That was absolutely fascinating. Can we all give Thomas a round of applause? So I'll give you the power now. Hopefully that worked. Thank you, Thomas. So interesting.
Thank you.
Thanks. It was really interesting to hear the story behind We Forget Home's beginning as well, and where that's come from, especially coming from artwork. And thank you for commenting on the opportunities that have come from making a game over the pandemic as well. I think that's really interesting, and it's a topic that's come up throughout the festival, so it's great to hear your perspective on it. Thank you again to Thomas. Next up we have Brian Allen from Bearharmmer Games joining us. I'll just bring you up. Hello, Brian.
Hello. So my name is Brian. Like Thomas, I'm originally from North America. I'm a Canadian and American. I actually also used to live in New York City, funnily enough. But we moved to Edinburgh, I guess 2.5 years ago now. My wife works as a paleontology postdoctoral researcher at Edinburgh University. And so that gave me a nice runway to focus on Unreal Dev as well. But prior to that, I've worked kind of 8 years as a product manager and producer, primarily in mobile games, but also kind of recently for PlayStation 4 and PlayStation VR game. But this is my own independent project. So I use Unreal Engine 4, and I use the VR expansion plugin for a lot of the stuff. So I've taken a video of some of the latest stuff that I've been adding, but first I just wanted to show a trailer of kind of what's on the store now. Basically, I launched it early access, and I've been making adjustments to the game based on feedback. So first, I'll show you the trailer. Oh, I think I need to share a screen, sorry. It's funny, with all this virtual reality stuff, I'm still like, I'm a noob when it comes to Zoom calls. Okay. Let me unmute this. Oh. Oh. So that was the trailer for the original version. Can you guys just give me a quick nod if the audio level was like good or bad? Okay, and so now I'll show you what I've been working on recently.
Hold down the direction you want the teleport to
So
exit.
here's a bit of the new tutorial. I was recording this just this morning. Some things are a little bit broken
There are other movement
because
options
I'm still
in the
actively
Hold
working
down
on it.
A or X for 2 seconds in either
Kind
hand
of like
to
had the
change
hand position changed when I updated the engine. But this is kind of the nice relaxing kind
now
of like
change one of the
bare
hands to snap turn
bedroom.
and try a snap turn.
Just kind of,
So snappy. Okay, follow me out of the house now. I want to go introduce you to one of the turtles of our village.
so here I wanted to show, it's kind of like, I think fun to give people the ability to kind of play like when they were kids or if they are kids, to grab different objects. You know, so here I grab a few, and I made all the kind of toys in the room grippable. So, you know, I'm just kind of messing around putting them on the bed with the bears. And I think just that level of like being able to tactilely like play with different toys, mess around with things, you know, it kind of brings us back to childhood. So this is kind of the more relaxing phase of the game. But you can see I'm just having a little trouble gripping. It's not the highest quality video from this morning. So I'll just fast forward that a bit. You can see a bit of the village in action. So this is showing part of the tutorial where
I'm going to go over
I've got
to
a
the
panel that
teleport.
comes up.
Come
You
and
can
join me
point
when you're
lasers
happy
at
with
it
the
for the settings. I've got sliders on there for like foliage density, for how much grass there is, and that kind of thing.
Okay,
So then, I'm not sure if you guys have this in Scotland. I haven't seen one on schoolyards, but I've made kind of a physics-based tetherball pole as part of the tutorial.
Nice swing.
Just to kind of get people used to the idea of swinging the hammers and throwing.
Whoa, nice hit.
And so the voice of this bear is Jane Dadney, who's an Edinburgh-based sound designer who's been helping me with the project. And the music is actually that of your presenter, Lucy Holland.
Sometimes you must have some accuracy.
And that's the voice of my wife, who I employed to do a little bit of an over-the-top French accent. So she's cheering you on as you throw for the targets. So I'm missing a few times.
Magnifique. Bravo.
My tracking was a little bit messed up this morning, so it's normally a bit easier than this.
Time to show you something very special.
But this is the next system I'm trying to work on, of letting you play as a 3D human character, but seeing yourself in third person. And so this shows a bit the calibration process. So you take a T-pose.
Put your arms in a T-pose and click the trigger. Put your arms in a T-pose and click the trigger. Put your arms at your sides and then click the trigger.
Magnifique. Now you have what
Then obviously I still have a bit of work to do. I need to make the hands invisible once you're at this stage. But you know, I think this is going to be really cool because, you know, I play a lot of games like The Witcher and, you know, Horizon Zero Dawn. And so a lot of times in VR, you know, you just see yourself as, you know, kind of this pair of hands. But, you know, I think it'll be a lot more interesting for people to have certain moments in the game where it kind of comes out and you see yourself, you know, as the character doing various things. You know, combating enemy toads and such. So I'm still working on it a bit more to exactly how I'll be using that system. But that's I think has a lot of potential. Oh, and this is just showing a different weapon. So I've got these Ninja Star kind of Viking Viking weapons as well, and they have a kind of a secondary mode where when you throw them, you can click again, and then they spin around. And this part I think is fun for showing the interactivity that's possible in VR. So here you'll see outside of this house, I have this collection of vegetables. And my tracking is messing up, so sorry, it's a little glitchy. But I've been working on this kitchen scene, and where I think it'll be fun, where you can, I'm planning to make it so you can kind of like throw food at this bear, and his head will move to it and eat it. Just because I think little dumb stuff like this is fun to experiment with in VR. So fast forward a little bit, you can see I'm just grabbing a plate of apples, and I'm attempting to bring them towards him, but yeah, the physics got kind of wonky there, and I lost tracking a bit. So here's one more kind of funny bit without just, you know, grabbing a thing of weapons. I think, and so I'll fast forward a bit. This is what I want to show. Like, made this room of like a little sauna. It was to kind of complete the village, and then this part's a bit glitchy because I'm still working out kinks of the combat. But I'll show you a bit kind of how the combat is meant to function. I've got the shield of the character following your hammer throws. And then I just wanted to conclude, I guess, by showing just a bit of the audio. So you can see, you can start to hear, and this is really special inside VR, you can start to hear the waterfall kind of from far away. And then when you get closer, it's just, you know, makes for a really relaxing scene. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So I'll be working on this more and putting out kind of a big update to the game at some points, probably this year. Yeah, just trying to make it kind of like a Zelda kind of style game where you can explore and go around.
Thank you, Brian. Big round of applause again for that awesome demo of Brian's. Oh, did I click the right button? Can we clap? No, I messed that up too. Hopefully now.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. It's so interesting. Yeah, like Brian mentioned, I've had a little bit of a preview of your work before, but it's really cool to see how far it's come and hear you talk more about where it's come from. I've got lots of questions as well, but we'll move on to our next speaker and then we can come back. But thank you again. So next up we have Antoniou, who's the founder of Furry Tail Dragon. Andy designs games and immersive experiences with inclusivity at the forefront. He's also an award-winning generalist creative consultant and director, working across several creative industries. And Andy has most recently delivered for the likes of Sky, Nat Geo, and Johnson & Johnson. He's been working on a project called M, which is a VR sitting simulator, which he's going to show you more of now. And I won't say too much more in case I spoil anything. So we'll just bring Andy up just now. Hi, Andy. How's it going?
Thanks, Lucy. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Right, now, let's see if I can get this going. 1 second. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Brilliant. So, hello, everyone. I'm Andy. Those are my details. Founder of Furry Tail Dragon, which basically just me, but it's, there we go. And I work across several creative industries. Most recently in games, I've worked with, worked for Silver Rain for a short while, who are awesome, and you should go and follow them, check them out. They're doing some wonderful stuff there. Yeah, I'm talking about M today. Now, M is a game that I'm no longer making. So you may be wondering, what's this guy doing? Why are you speaking about a game that you're not making anymore? And the reason is because it's relevant because of this. And because of this, many of us, well, all of us are locked inside. And many of us may be feeling like we're also trapped inside our own mind. And I haven't really spoken publicly about what M is really about before, but M deals with some issues of mental health or mental health issues, specifically clinical depression. And today I'd just like to, explore that, but also look at how specifically how the demo of M was created to try and allow as many people as possible to play it at events. So it had accessibility or inclusivity, if we're using a broader term, at the forefront. But when I started making them, I wanted a few constraints because constraints are catalysts for creativity, which is a quote that can be attributed to pretty much everyone, but it's true. So I'll just skim through this bit quite quickly, but so here are some references. So I knew I wanted something that was quite high contrast. I wanted to exterior spaces to blend into interior spaces. I wanted the contrast between hard edges and softer curves. And part of the reason I wanted these exterior elements to come into interior elements is because of something called pattern separation, the damage that happens to pattern separation in the mind when people experience mental health issues. And so memories blend into each other and, things are, can be confused. So I also started looking at artist spaces, which kind of fit that idea because in this game, it's a key part of the game. But and looking at shadow and light artists who deal specifically with light and shadow. And in this game, you can pick up shadows and they become physical objects. And again, it allows for that strong contrast and powerful silhouettes. And it deals with abstraction and breaking things down to their core elements and optical illusions. So here we have a couple of physicals, some 3D zoetropes. Now, going back to accessibility, and as I said earlier, inclusivity, I prefer the term inclusivity, although it's a much broader term and it can include a lot more things than just accessibility. But specifically today, we're talking about things like how the visuals, have to be considered in an experience like this, the audio, and the movement and dexterity of the person who may be playing this at an event. And since we are quite short in time, I'm going to try and talk about them all together. But for more depth, GameAccessibilityGuidelines.com is definitely worth a visit, and I'll put this link again at the end of the talk. So this is the intro to M, and you can see we're floating through this on a boat through this abstracted world, and here we see the first consideration for, well, how do we make sure that the majority of people can play this if they want to? And this is in this particular instance. So if we come back a little bit, where we have strong silhouettes, we have the contrast between light and dark, but when the player looks away from a point of interest, time slows down, so they don't miss anything. So whether you're playing this in VR or on a monitor, because it's playable through both, key points of interest won't be missed. Nobody's at a disadvantage playing it. And because one of the considerations of VR is it takes longer for someone, even if their motor skills are fine, to turn their head than it does to move the mouse. Okay. And now I'm going to show you the end of the demo. So let's just jump straight to the end. And again, some of the key considerations are there, except this time we're not being moved along. This time we want the player to traverse the world. And so we give them these seated positions that appear and then they can teleport between. And they're strategically placed so that people don't have to turn themselves too far. There's always a point. You can always reach another point by jumping between these without having to turn too far or do too much. And now, just to make everyone dizzy, I'm going to go straight back to the beginning again. Because before the intro, this is what we get. We have the option to choose whether we want to play the experience in VR or play it on a monitor in Pancake Mode. And it's all diegetic. There's no non-diegetic UI here or going on. But just one of the things I'd like to point out here is the sound, even without the audios, the sound lets you know when you're over a selection. You hear that heartbeat that is probably quite faint. On here, maybe, I don't know. It sounds faint in my earphones. But you get the color change, but the color change is also a value change. It becomes brighter. If I turn off the color, and you can do this by pressing Control Windows and C if you're on Windows 10. So now we're in grayscale mode. You see, you can't actually tell that very easily, but the spotlight lets you know. So the intensity of the spotlight changes, and the color, and when you change, and when you select, again, the size and intensity changes. So that's a consideration, to let people know, how a selection has been made, can be made. Now, which leads us nicely into colorblindness. Now, one piece of advice I was given early on was, just play the game in grayscale. Just play it in, just switch to grayscale and you're fine. And that works to a point. But here are the different types of vision. So at the top, this is what the majority of people will see. This is the spectrum of light, of color that most people see. And then you have deuteranomaly, which is green weak. Then you have red weak, and then you have red blind, and you have green blind, and then the two blues, which aren't affected as much in as many people because it affects the cones in their eyes and the way it affects them. And then very, very few people also have this achromatopsia, which is they see everything grayscale. Now, one thing worth bearing in mind is that there are instances where people also can confuse red with black. So that in that particular instance, it's an issue of value as well as hue being confused. So anyway, but moving forward from this, a good tool to use is Codebliss. If anyone is interested, you can just drop screenshots of your game in here and and just test them out, which is fantastic. And again, this link will be at the end of the talk. But here are some screenshots of M and how different people see it. So at the top here, I should have labeled these. In all honesty, I've forgotten how but I'm pretty sure I've done red weak, red blind, green weak here. And I got to worry for a second when I was putting this talk together because I thought, I'm sure I took that emblem into account. Like, it's not the strongest part of the game. That probably did need more work for the final game, but it should work. And then I remembered that Codebliss actually kind of crops in when you try and save an image down, and that's kind of what's happened here. But you can see, this is quite a straightforward part of the game. It's very high contrast in all areas, so it's quite easy for it to work with colorblindness in mind, but it does. So going to the next part, although there's not much color in the experience, there is some, and there's a bit of a nautical theme that goes through. And so I've kind of lent into that to try and help with this too. So where this is, it's hard to tell from here, but it's kind of an abstract tree stump, an installation art piece, but in the narrative of the game. But I pushed a little blue into that to make this cyan and to lean more into that nautical theme. So we can consider people more in how they view color, but also the parts of the puzzle that have been solved are much brighter. The parts that that haven't are darker. Elements in the foreground, like this railing, although simple, has a Fresnel effect. So we're essentially, the edge is lighter. So we're constantly trying to create as much visual clarity as possible. And to just watch that in motion, there are some other things to consider. So there are a lot of ring puzzles in M, and then later through Shadows Alone. But one thing you may notice there is there's kind of an auto lock. Although you can freely rotate, it's not like a stop, stop, stop. They do auto lock at 15-degree increments. And then when the puzzle is close to being solved, I found at the first event I showed it, that some people were finding it a little difficult to, to just kind of just tweak that last bit. So it kind of auto adjusts, and that's just to help people. If they're having a little trouble just kind of tweaking it, it gives them a little helping hand. And even simple things like, particles leading the eye and audio that goes with it. And that's the great thing about VR is, attenuation and spatialization of audio works really well and is a great way to tell people, hey, there's something next to you. There's something going on. So if we skip past that puzzle, and go straight into this, you'll see a shadow being picked up. And now, I've probably chosen the worst example here because this is the shadow that's the furthest away from you. So the sound's probably of the lowest volume, and I'm talking over it in this talk. But there is a sound that comes. So as you navigate the space around yourself around the space, you do hear like a whale sound, like that increases as you get, and a heartbeat that increases as you look towards, and as you do look towards it, that becomes more intense. And the same thing for these vines that grow next to you. You want people to look around to the side so that they are there, but also for people who are hard of hearing, there are the peripheral vines, which kind of let you know, oh, okay, let me look at those. Oh, I've spotted those. Now I see the ones that are right next to me. And again, from the tree, the light gets brighter from the side, as well as hearing the tree come down from the sky. Now, just skip forward here a little bit. And again, we're trying to lead the vision, which isn't so much an accessibility as a, just a general game design, thing you have to consider in VR. But the idea is that when scenes play out like this, they can be the seating areas that you can teleport between are placed such that you don't have to turn too far to do it. And if you do, it will pause and it will wait for you, and it will show one of those particles, as the effects happen at a seated point to say, right, well, there's only one seat in this environment where this isn't visible, not very well or very easily. And so I don't want people to have to kind of do that. So what it does is, if you happen to be in that seat when this is triggered, it will just have this effect. It will wait for you to go there, and then it will start playing. So just to make this a little easier. And going back to references, this turns into a zoetrope, which brings the silhouette of light to life. And this is, I'm showing this last, partly because this is one area that I didn't achieve what I wanted to achieve with regards to disability. In this particular part, I couldn't get it in sync at the time to be able to slow down time on this particular section. But this is something that I did need to do. So, let's end on a negative. And that's it. But essentially, these are just a few, and I'm trying to condense this down, obviously, for a mini talk. But these are a few of the ways that I in particular, try to consider as many people as possible. Now, there are two things, right? You have your demographic for a game, the people that you're going to market to, the people that will want to play this. But then you also, you want as many people to be able to play it. So it's not just about who wants to play. It's, let's just make sure everyone can play this. And let's make sure as many people can play this without having to, and there's nothing wrong with this, but without having to go into a menu and having to select the accessibility settings they need. Now, that should always be there. That means people should have that menu and should be able to specify the settings that they need to be able to enjoy an experience, definitely. But also, I strongly believe that the design should take that into consideration as much as possible to make so that the game can be played by as many people as possible in its default state. And that's essentially what I wanted to explore here. And none of this is advice. It's just I wanted to express what I felt helped me and some of the considerations that I put into place when making the demo for this. And I may come back to this game in the future. I may, but it will look and be very different. But at this time, where we're all locked in, and I thought, this might be the best focus to wrap this talk into, this experience that does deal with being locked in your own mind, and that's essentially what the logo is. The design. We have these, as I said earlier, this contrasting light and dark, the hard edges, the softer curves, the focus, the color which leads you along the way, and which also works even in grayscale mode, but which I'm also not making anymore. Thank you, and here are those links if you are interested in looking into them a bit more.
Thank you so much, Andy. That was absolutely fascinating. I loved hearing about the detail and care that you've put into and yeah, it's sad to hear that it's not in the pipeline just now, but hopefully, I really hope it comes back. I'd love to play it. And you taught me a new term. I'd never heard the phrase pancake mode before, and it's the perfect descriptor for something that's not VR, that's meant for VR on a screen. So that's brilliant too.
Yeah, I can't take credit for that. I don't remember who originally said it, but yeah.
Well, yeah, thanks again. If you, we can maybe take a note of those links as well and try and pop them in the chat. And if you don't mind, stop sharing your screen. Oh, and also, I'm sorry, I will ask everybody to give Andy a big round of applause as well for that talk. Thank you. Fantastic. So we're coming up to the end of our mini talks. So next up, we have got the fantastic Jung In Jung and Paul Blackham, who are here to show us a bit about their VR experience, Sound of Light. Just to give you a little introduction, Jung In Jung is an interdisciplinary artist and researcher. Her work focuses on the playful and intimate relationship with sound, movement, and interactive technology. She's presented her work at various international conferences and festivals. In 2019, she joined the Research Centre In Game, Innovation for Games and Media Enterprise, based in Dundee, as a Research and Development Fellow. Her research interests lie in interactive engagement, experimentation with different senses, accessibility, diversity, and inclusivity. Currently, she is involved in several projects from In Game, such as developing and testing a new text-to-speech plugin for dyslexic players with low-tech games. And we'll be hearing from Ali Lowe from Low Tech tomorrow at our mini talks as well, our Games and Empathy talks. And Jung In Jung is running the Experimental Games Lab with the partner organisation Biome Collective as a brain trust. And Paul Blackham, I think, will be joining us for the Q&A, but he is also a games artist and research assistant at In Game. His skill set predominantly focuses on 3D modelling and texturing, but also working in rapid prototyping of interactive media. He joined In Game after completing a professional master's in games development at Abertay University, and his experience is in a variety of additional areas such as shader programming and pipeline tool development, which allow him to work holistically on prototypes or assist in projects wherever needed. So I'll bring Jung In Jung up to get us started. Oh, there you are. Oh, I did have you and then lost you again. There we are. Hey, Jung In, how are you?
Hello, hi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you for joining us. I'm right, it's yourself giving us the talk part, is that right? Awesome.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to share my screen first. Yeah, and let me. Okay, so my name is Jung In, and thanks for the long introduction. So you probably heard that now I'm working at In Game as a research development fellow, and Paul is also here, and who is also helping me this project, and he did the game artwork, and he will be around for any game art related questions for the Q&A later. And well, Paul actually just texted me right before the event saying he might join wearing a hat, but he's not wearing a hat. I think his hair looks great because he recently had a little baby, and I think it's like a lockdown daddy look, wearing hat, but then I saw Thomas join the talk also wearing hat, so I'm just saying. So thank you for joining, everyone. Before I talk about the project, Sound of Light, I'd like to explain my background a little bit. So I'm an artist who majored in sound design and sound art, so I'm actually not a game developer, but I started using Unity to realize my ideas. And previously, I've been working with contemporary dancers to create interactive sound competition, and I used hacked game controllers to track dancers' movements, which in result translated into a sound competition. And recently, I started exploring VR to use it in creative ways, and I got interested in Oculus Quest in particular because of its real-time hand tracking feature. So for the people in this room who might actually never seen Oculus Quest, so this is the Oculus Quest 1. Now there's Oculus Quest 2, it's even at a more affordable price, I think. So these are like full-front cameras which can track the hand movement in front of it. So this kind of physical interaction seems more interesting for me because I've been working on movement and sound. So I decided to explore what kind of communications can be formed or expressed through this kind of interaction. Since I'm a sound artist, I thought it would be nice to control sound elements with different kinds of hand gestures, not only visuals. Previously, I developed a single-player VR work, Hot Summer Afternoon, with Paul as well. And for this work, the open source machine learning tool Wackinator was used to train different kinds of hand gestures and map audiovisual elements related to those gestures. I was supposed to perform this work at the Baby Castles Gallery in New York last April, but obviously, because of the pandemic, the performance didn't happen. And also until that time, I didn't really consider to develop a work to share with someone else due to the complicated open sound control communication between those three programs, the Android standalone app for my headset, and Wackinator for machine learning, and MaxMSP for sound composition. So thinking of setting up a remote performance was another headache because I also had to think about there won't be any latency issues between the headset and the sound coming from my computer and extra. So traditionally, as a performer, I could just take my laptop to the performance stage, but with this current situation, I really had to rethink the ways to engage with the audience as this pandemic lasts longer than I thought. So therefore, I decided to create Sound of Light as a multiplayer project to enable sound performance using the same hand tracking feature, but with other performances. I recorded a short gameplay with my in-game colleagues, and I will play that first before I explain the project further. So the project is still in its early stage. So the mapped hand gestures to sound in this demo is quite simple, like pinching fingers, but eventually more gestures will be added to do different jobs. And the video was recorded with the Oculus headset, and it's only recorded as a mono sound, unfortunately, but it is designed with spatial audio, and that's why I was like pinching my fingers to trigger a sound close to the other player's ears. So it's quite nice. You hear the sound, like little sound moving around your head. And in the second scene, I wanted to create an environment where we became like little creatures making weird buzzing noises. For Sound of Light, I tried to integrate everything with the build file so that I could easily send the build to other people to test it together. So all those recordings were done remotely by simply sending APK build files to my colleagues. For my current knowledge and skills, I had to give up some of those procedural stuff from the previous project, but my priority was to create a shared audiovisual experience with other performers. I use the word performers, but of course, the boundaries between the performers and audience are blurred in this project. Basically, I didn't want people to just watch the work as spectators just because it's presented as an artwork, but I wanted them to actively experience and feel the virtual world we created. Eventually, what I'd like to create is a multiplayer or multi-performer site-specific sound performance in VR. I'm not sure whether I can use the term site-specific for VR, but what I mean is that the sound will be, it's all carefully designed for different environments. I don't know whether you could hear that, but different kind of reverb was used for 2 different scenes. So once the project is a little bit more polished, other performers will be invited to have improvisational sessions with me, and it will be meaningful sessions to observe how the other users can intuitively learn and engage with the work, and also with other players. Also, I hope to make it as a kind of public event where I can invite some people who can also just want to join as spectators. I'm sure Tinderbox audience might be the best audience to start with. So we will update further developments through the project website or Twitter. So feel free to contact us if you have any questions after this event. Thank you.
That was absolutely fascinating, Jung In. Thank you. And what a stunning piece of work as well. Yeah, brilliant to see it in action. And I love the idea of a multiplayer VR experience, and especially a site-specific one. That sounds brilliant. So I'm looking forward to seeing that happen for sure. And I keep forgetting, how rude. Please give Jung In a round of applause.
Thank you
for that fantastic demo. Absolutely brilliant. So I think for the last 5 or 10 minutes, it'd be nice to get all our speakers up on screen and maybe go through a few questions. We've had some really interesting ones come up in the chat, and I've got plenty coming to mind as well. Hello, everybody. Thanks again. I'll just launch into a few things. Liam asked, do you think that VR has a greater capacity for empathy, being able to fully immerse yourself into another point of view? He also says he's barely ever used VR before as well, so I don't know if anyone has any thoughts that come to mind. Maybe, oh, Thomas, please go ahead.
I got my start with that very idea about empathy. The first time I had tried VR was because I was lucky enough to sell a painting and I could afford Oculus Dev Kit 2. And when I had tried it, the sense of presence just inspired me. You know, they always say, you know, when you start a game dev career, always go small. Well, I wanted to do a homeless person simulator, what it's like to be a homeless person trying to beg for change in a subway and have people react in the all sorts of mean and nasty ways that they do to the downtrodden. And yes, I think that VR has an incredible potential for generating empathy, to be able to put yourself into somebody else's shoes. Certainly, I'm now reduced to working on a very cartoonish, smaller scale. But yes, I'd love to eventually try and make it so you could live a life that is not ordinarily yours. And basically, if you could walk, as they say, a mile in a man's shoes, you know where he's coming from. And I think VR has got that incredible potential to do so, especially when, you know, obviously the newer devs are just learning how to interpret this new medium, but you get the people who are adept at telling stories, things like lighting, things like, you know, musical cues. You can create an emotionally impactful experience that you can put yourself into somebody else's position. What it's like to be a refugee, what it's like to be having a terminal disease, and how people react to you. I think VR has that potential.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's definitely something everybody's touched on in some way as well, haven't they? That kind of accessibility and interactive element. I was wondering as well, because it seems like there's a lot around developing something in VR that might differ to the traditional or more mainstream game development process, I suppose. And I guess it's maybe that you have more to consider with being that immersed in an environment. But does anyone want to explain a bit more about how that might change their approach? Or like Andy, especially, you've touched on how much care you put into the visuals with interactiveness and the clarity of it.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing in VR is getting someone to look where you want them to look. And so it's, you know, that bit I showed at the end of the talk, you have that massive light silhouette on the wall, and it's all going on there. You know, I'd say that's pretty much as high contrast as you can get. That's, you know, like you're trying to, it's like a beacon, it's like a neon sign, and there's sound coming from that direction, and people still want to look, and oh, look at that texture on that tree stump. Oh, you know, there's always something that someone wants to look, or oh, there's a coffee cup, I'll pick that up. And meanwhile, there's like bombs, there are bombs going off over there and whatever. It's I think that's one of the hardest things in VR, and it's about iteration. I found anyway, is about just showing it to people and seeing kind of what works and what doesn't, and then how to just tweak it and tweak it and tweak it to try and guide people to look where you want them, so they can experience it, so they can, as you say, as Thomas said, you know, feel that, you know, to be immersed in it, to be, you know, to experience everything that's been designed for that experience.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so interesting to hear about these. I guess there are things that you would consider in games making anyway, but it seems like it's all brought to the forefront in VR. So it's really interesting. I wonder, Jung In and Paul, if there's any comments you have on that coming from a performative and multiplayer aspect as well. I bet that brings a whole new element.
I'm sure Paul might be have something to say, because like where he initially designed this, one thing like we cannot really move around, but I just implemented a teleport function and started moving around, and then Paul was like, oh, you know, I didn't know that you were going to do it. So I'm sure Paul can say something.
Yeah, I mean, I think with our kind of, with the gameplay now, sorry, you'll probably hear a baby in the background, by the way. But yeah, with the gameplay now, I think it was something where being multiplayer is almost helps in that you can't help but look at each other when you're interacting with someone in a VR space. So in some ways that kind of helps guide where you are. But yeah, absolutely, that put me in a bit of a surprise, because I'd made these environments to kind of only look right from where you're standing. So as soon as you could move around, it took a bit of tweaking, but it's something that, I think being in a larger environment, in some ways, the multiplayer nature of this really, really helps guide you into looking in those directions, because I think and I suppose that kind of feeds in a little bit to the empathy side of things. Once you're in that situation, you've got this slight anonymity in that it's not your face, it's not your person, and you can feel quite comfortable just interacting in really simplistic ways with the other player.
Yeah, brilliant. It definitely sounds like, yeah, it's such an important aspect, is getting people into that environment in a comfortable way. So thank you for that. I'm wondering as well, Brian, with Bearharmmer, because yours is such a tactile, interactive project, there must be a lot for you to consider there too. I don't know if you've got any comments on that, or if there's anything you've found about how to help the player feel that they can interact in those tactile ways.
Yeah, for tactile stuff, I mean, one of the things that I found that's interesting, I think, is for games like mine, like I was inspired a lot by Skyrim, you know, and trying to kind of recreate that, but with some kind of different combat mechanics. And so one of the things that you're always kind of struggling with in VR is motion sickness when you're allowing the player to move around. And so one of the things kind of related to tactile stuff that I've found is that people like talk about having less motion sickness when they're actively doing things with their arms and moving. So I've watched players, like when we take the game to conferences, you know, if they're very timid and if they're just moving around, then typically they're like, there's probably a higher proportion of them that will say they have motion sickness. But when you are like moving and throwing and doing stuff, like you're not really thinking as much about like, oh my gosh, like this, you know, world is all moving around me. So I think, you know, from that perspective, it's interesting learning that, you know, in designing for VR, if you do allow free motion, that the more that you have the player engaged and moving around with stuff, the less that motion sickness will be a problem.
Wow, I hadn't thought of that perspective on it either, the focus that it gives you. Andy, you touched on that too a bit with your approach to having this like kind of sitting, I'm not sure if you'd call it controlled, but like focused interaction. And somebody's also asked in the chat, Thomas has said, were there any obstacles on your pursuit for as much inclusivity as possible in M? So I'm not sure if you've got any comments.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I mean, I had no issues with motion sickness with M, first of all, because it's seated and you're just teleported from one seated position to another. Yeah, and you know, I mean, with the other question was, were there any obstacles to your pursuit? Yeah, a few. Testing it. You know, that's why things like codeless are handy and that's just one element. That's just, you know, colorblindness. But you know, once you start taking it to events, even small events, it's nice to get as many people as possible playing, and just see what they struggle with. It's you try to design around a certain problem, you know, to solve certain problems, but you don't always know what the real problems are until people start playing it. So yes, yeah, the obstacles were finding enough people to play it, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Coming off of that as well, because I think this might have come up a couple of times in the chat. There's a few comments or questions about how accessible VR is, just in terms of the equipment, or you know, both for making it and playing it. Is that something you're seeing is changing just to everybody, or has been a problem in, you know, finding people that have the means to test?
I personally, I found that, well, I mean, VR, if you strip it down, you know, you have a monitor on your head, and you know, and if we're talking about 6 dots, like 6 degrees of freedom, you know, it not only tracks the rotation of your head, but you know, the movement of the headset. Let's, you know, really simplify it. So you know, that in itself is, you know, I think there's probably it's probably less accessible now than it was in the past, because we've moved to, you know, hand controls, etc., which are great, you know, for those experiences, and you know, they're very immersive for people who can do that, and that's fantastic. It becomes harder though to adapt a game like that. I'm sure Jung In Jung, Paul would say, or everyone would say, you know, all the other wonderful presenters would say, that, you know, that's a much harder game to make accessible for as many people as possible. But if we're just talking about the headset itself, you know, that can be made to work without VR. So, you know, because there's one limitation with VR that you can't get around, and that's that if someone can't turn their head, they can't play a VR experience. So, you know, that's the key consideration there, I think.
Yeah, and I hadn't, even the extra hand control element I hadn't thought of, but obviously, yeah, that sounds like it's a crucial element for a lot of the projects here. Does anybody have any other thoughts or comments on what that's been like? Thomas?
Yeah, I just wanted to also throw in, one of the things that I discovered, since my audience is a bit younger, is especially the original Vive wand controllers, a lot of smaller hands couldn't use them. So I had adapted the motion controls to also accept like Xbox style controller input as well, because younger kids, they can pick those up and they can use them fairly intuitively as well. So I've been trying to incorporate that kind of input as well. And there's a semi-local charity called Able Gamer that has been making and adapting hardware for disabled people to play games. And as Andy had pointed out, if you have the restriction of not being able to move your head, it does affect a lot of gameplay experiences in VR. I'm trying to keep it as a third-person perspective game that somebody with that limitation could still enjoy my game.
One point.
Oh, sorry, Jung In. Yeah, go.
Yeah. So since we're using hand tracking options, so it can be a limitation for those people who cannot also move their hands, but then also it can be an opportunity for some people who's using sign language, actually. So that there are different points. So of course we cannot really, satisfy everyone, but it's also another kind of communication. So in the gameplay I showed, we're saying like, hey, like for 3 seconds, hold it, and we're doing this kind of communication, which is a luxury of people who can use all these 10 fingers. So I'm just wanting to point out, these technologies can be used for different kinds of needs.
And one great benefit, I think, of using hands is that, it includes a lot of people who feel alienated by games, by, motion controllers or a gamepad, or, just even having, like whatever, it's, there is that side of it, which is that more people, are entering the space because of, the way we take away that abstraction in how we control experiences.
Yeah, great points. Thank you. Brian has also added here in the UK, special effects is a huge charity as well, as Thomas brought up, adapting hardware to suit more needs. So yeah, thanks for that shout out as well. Sadly, I think we've gone over a little bit, so thank you for your extra time, everybody. We might need to round up there now, but please let's have another round of applause for our amazing, fascinating speakers and demos. Thank you so much for your time.